Before we start our episode this week, we just want to apologize for the technical difficulties in our mics the past couple of episodes. We've had to do some troubleshooting. But we're hoping you can hear us.
Yeah, we are hoping to get it where we'll have two cameras and just kind of like look a little bit better. But in the process of doing that, the mics gave out the last one, which ended up being 2 episodes because it was so long. Mm-hmm. So 2 episodes, the mics were all crazy. And then today we went to go set up and it took us about 35 minutes because we changed all these things. So bear with us.
Bear with us. But we're back.
Yeah, we're back.
And we decided today we wanted to talk on the topic of adapting to change because I feel like that is number one, just like the season that we're in right now.
Yeah.
At Coco, but also change is just hard in general. So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, adapting to change, but also just like in life, I feel like change is always happening, especially like in this season that a lot of us are in with like having kids and just like marriage changing, friendships changing, life changing, career changes happening. And we just kind of want to talk about that a little bit. And number one, as always, let you guys know that you're not alone if you're struggling with change or if you do struggle with change in general and just some of the things that we've been through.
Nobody like loves change.
Yeah, nobody.
Like I don't think that's a thing. Hard. I mean, maybe, but I feel like general change is really hard for everybody. Yeah. So I feel like if you're a person who you're like, I just hate change, it's like you're not alone.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's like loving on it, but I do think that after changes happen, oftentimes
you realize it was for the better or you learned something from it at least.
Right.
Yeah. I think that has been the hardest part about owning a business for me. Is like, it's just constant change. It's constant pivoting. It's constant reevaluating. It's constant, like, you think you have it figured out. And then you realize that, no, you don't, because it's just always change, especially in retail, especially in small business world.
Totally. And I don't think that, like, before we started this, I was really aware of how much pivoting we would do because it seems so straightforward. Like, you get the clothes, you try them on, you sell them. Like, it seems so cut and dry. You're like, what could you be pivoting?
Right.
But when I tell you, there was a time period where we were pivoting, honestly, so often that we were all like, let's hold on, like, freeze in time, pause, take a time out.
Yeah.
Let's evaluate here because while pivoting is good, sometimes you're like, we have to have like one little anchor piece or this or that, you know.
But
we've learned so much from all of the change and
always
transitions.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing to note with that is we all kind of push each other sometimes in a good way. Sometimes it doesn't seem like at the very beginning to think differently and to embrace the pivot.
Yeah.
But we also know when to stand up and say, okay, wait, nope, everybody dial it back, because we also are a group of people who have 10,000 ideas in their head at once.
Yeah, always have.
And we're ready to run with it.
Ideas.
Which I love about everyone here. Yep. Everyone here has the drive and is like, wants to just go, 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 go.
Yep.
Which is amazing. But there are times where we have to like check each other and say like,
now is not
be
the
realistic.
time.
Now is not the time.
What are our priorities?
While I love that, let's put that in the big picture idea and like come back. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I mean, we all do it.
Totally.
But
totally. And I feel like sometimes like really big risks sound really exciting and stuff, but then it's like, okay, but we got to be like calculated about this, you know?
And I definitely am more of a nervous risk taker. And so there have been like a couple, you know, decisions here and there that we've gone to make that, like, for example, you and Tracy have been like all in, and I'm like, I know that I sound like the big bag of wolf coming in here, but I'm just not there. I want to like get some data to back it or this or that, which, like you said, you don't, but like it feels like it when you're the one who says. But I also think it's really good for us,
it's
because there's been other things that you know, someone said pump the brakes on this part or that part, and it seems like, but why?
Yeah.
But it's good for us.
Yeah, I feel like change from a business standpoint, I mean, like, trends are always changing. Processes are always changing. I mean, like, so
that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Let's dig into, like, the big overarching topics of what kind of change. So you had mentioned, go ahead and.
Yeah. So the things that I, like, kind of bulleted out are that trends are always changing. Processes are always changing. Availability of items is always changing.
Always.
Our vendors are always changing what they're telling us.
And the vendor who to communicate is always changing.
Yes. Algorithms are always changing, or like even Shopify is constantly making updates that like impact the way that we have created these processes. I mean, it's always something. And then also just like the growth brings change. Like,
totally.
You know, the more we sell and the more customers we have and the more things we dabble in, the more we have to reevaluate things and pivot and learn and fail and realize like, oh shit, well, that's not going to work, you know, and having to like take a step back and think like, okay, well, now we need to make a change to this process, or we need to improve how we're doing X, Y, and Z. Like it's always something.
Yeah. And like you just kind of said, like the part about sometimes when you have to fail, like you wouldn't learn if you didn't fail. Like, you know, I think we've said it before, like when Sav started and she's like, but I don't know how to do any of this. I'm like, neither do we. Do or did we. I'm like, we're not going to be mad about a fail. And if I think about it over time, I'm thinking of a few times that like you or I have like, because we feel like the whole business, the whole team, like there's only 4 of us. So like every decision you make, we always say like, we can't be doing this. We're a team, but we oftentimes will fault ourselves for certain mistakes, which is not the case. And we have to remind each other like, no, it's a team effort. Like, for example, I do the buying, and if like something flops, I'm like, oh my God, like I picked that item. I put that in that week. I communicated, and I'm like it'll keep me up at night. And then I'm like, you know, we have to realize like that's not true.
That's what I love about our team though. Like even if someone does F up, which like, I mean, I do all the time. Like I make dumb mistakes all the time, but like no one here ever makes me feel like, why the hell did you do that? You know, like we're all just like, it's all right. We're gonna get through it. And I think that that's the beauty and the pivoting. It's like,
I think so too. And I vividly remember a conversation you and I had in Atlanta. And I remember it was like the first time we've had like a nitty gritty down to the wire conversation.
Yeah.
And I remember you like being upset and being like, you think that I'm not doing well. And I'm like, whoa, I promise you it's not that. And
that's
we've
the hard
learned
part, though, because it is.
Because you
like,
take so much.
Yeah. It's so much pressure.
It's so much pressure.
Like,
and from her eyes, she thought that it was like me thinking she's not doing well. Whereas I'm like, no, I'm just saying like as a team, here's how we should pivot. Whereas I'm like, oh, I never thought about it. Like, this is on you.
Totally.
You know,
totally.
But I feel like we've learned that over time.
Yeah.
Because.
And that's another thing. I mean, just like this is kind of spiraling off topic, but like having to wear so many hats and trying to do them all so well is just impossible sometimes, you know? And I feel like that's something that we've learned too is like, we can only do so much. Like trying to be a CFO, a CEO, a lead buyer, a leader, a mentor, like all these things. It's like, it's hard when you feel like you can't give 100% of your effort to everything and you fall short. But that is just the nature of really any career, I feel like, but especially like a small business. It's like, we could always be doing more. I could always be.
We could be up all night doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I said that to Sav earlier today. I was like, I could stay here for probably 7 or 8 more hours and still have a lot more to do tonight. But I'm like,
that's where the work-life balance comes in, though, and the burnout, like protecting those boundaries, and that is so important.
And I want to kind of circle back to that burnout piece because, but first I wanted to mention you had said something that made me think of something else is, what we have learned coming from just being like a team of the 2 of us to now having a team of the 4 of us plus an intern.
Yeah.
So 5 of us is the people that you have on your team matter.
Oh my gosh.
In the sense of like how you're going to work together, how you're going to encourage each other, how you're going to pick each other up, how you're going to like all of those things. It matters. Attitude matters. Drive matters. Like they make a difference. And we are so freaking lucky that we have a small team, yet every single person comes in here to bust butt and to help each other and to pick each other up. And not to say, I mean, this sounds like we're saying like we have the best team. We do have the best team ever. However,
I think more so it's like we've just all learned how to work together.
That's what I was going to say. However,
and it's taken time and it's been hard at times, but
I agree. That's what I was going to say. Like you don't hire someone off the bat and like you don't know them yet. Like you're going to do your best,
right,
to pick somebody who you think needs to best fill that spot, but like you really don't know somebody. And we've done a really good job learning how each other learns and trying to adapt that.
And that's taken a lot of pivoting too.
It's taken a lot of pivoting. And I wish Tracy was here today so we could speak on it. But Tracy and I have very different learning styles and or just like how we interpret things. Tracy is very numbers based, and she can look at a spreadsheet of like 1,000 cells and tell you something. We always
picture her brain as the Matrix.
And it's so freaking impressive.
It really is.
And I can't tell you how many times I've been like, why can't I just look at something like that? Like I want to be like that. But I've had to explain to Tracy that I'm a very like visual person, and she's helped me so much lately to like put things into a chart or this or that. And it's like, you know, like kudos to her for adapting her thinking to help me think and vice versa. And it's been like a learning curve, which is good. And just, you know, like Elizabeth often, like personality wise, she'll think of an idea, she's ready to run with it. And it's awesome. Sometimes we need that. You know, it's just like we all have different personalities. And I think that's really great.
Yeah.
But you got to learn to work with the different personalities.
Right. I was just going to say, I think that like a really big part of pivoting in any workplace or any like, you know, business environment, I think a big part of it is like, identifying like what your team's like strengths are and making sure that you're letting that shine through and you're playing that up. Like my strength is not being organized. I know that. So like, I don't have a lot of jobs that require being organized. And you guys have given me grace with that. And like, it's a constant shuffle of like, okay, well, here is her strength. Here is something that maybe she doesn't do super well. I'm using myself as an example.
No, I mean,
and then kind of changing how
and I
things
think this
work.
is an exact example of that. I am not as good on the creative. Like I can't go in and create some like.
She says this, but
no,
she is.
I'm not. Elizabeth's definitely more creative, but I can like keep a task. I can get it done. I got the date. Like I'm just very like task done. Task done. Check, check, check. So we actually like switched around roles in the sense of like I kind of took buying because I'm very like this is when it has to be bought. This is when it has to come in. Whereas
it's
like
very like timeline.
It's very
related.
time specific. Whereas when Elizabeth was buying, the stuff was all super cute. It's not like it was like the stuff. It was more so like, oh shoot, I gotta order this or that. Which is we just learned and pivoted. And then again, like just the other day, I'm like, hey, can you create this real quick? Because it's gonna be cuter if you do it. Like, you know, and just she does like all the uploading of the try on this and that. And like, we've learned that like this A needs to be done to get to B, and she's better at like tying the bow and the finished product. And I before need to just like get it
on schedule.
Ready. You know, like it's just we've learned that piece, and I think it's you know just another thing we've changed over time because when we started, this was certainly not what we were doing. And I'm just sitting here thinking this entire time I've been thinking we've been having this conversation talking about like hiring the right people on your team, and I'm like, wait, but you never actually hired me. And I'm like, oh God. Like,
I think I actually did officially hire you. Probably the most official hire. Well, like I think I had like an actual document.
That was like when I first started when we were doing design stuff. But when we started Coco, like I was never actually like hired at Coco. We just kind of like started it. But you're right. Like you did hire me on when we did design officially. But like this, I was like,
had you sign an NDA. Like I was that sweet.
I'm not even kidding.
That
I remember
was Peter's recommendation.
I do remember thinking, I was like,
what am I going to tell people?
What I'm going to tell people we're sitting out here in the shed, like on Canva. Like, what do you? Okay, but I was like, all right, I get it. Like, it's a business. But I was like, and I'm thinking, what? I'm the only one who has to sign that.
I know, right? Maybe we need to get that going.
Shit. If that tells you how official we were with hiring anyone else, it was so unofficial. But anyways, I've learned stuff.
The biggest like change.
We did hire staff.
Yeah, we did.
We didn't have a line for her to sign, but we did. We're learning.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was so funny. I feel like the biggest like overall change we probably have faced as a business was last fall.
Yeah.
And like for me, it was really understanding like how cash flow works in a business. And like it took about 1.5 years for that to like click for me. And it still is like a really hard thing to wrap my mind around. But last fall was like where it really clicked because we went to Vegas, and at that time we were like, we just need inventory, you know, and it was like, we were like, get the inventory in here.
Not to mention, let's set the scene. We also, I mean, last fall was the first time Tracy started coming into the office.
Yeah.
We had an intern. Like, there was so much change. It wasn't just
I also went to a conference, and there were all these things I learned.
She came back
and threw at everybody. And
yeah. I mean, and that really inspired the pivot.
Yeah.
But everything was new.
Everything was new. It was so many new things. And then just, I think that's really where, because up until then we were buying like really small amounts, just kind of one off. And we didn't have like much of a process again, because I was doing the majority of it. And it was just random.
And to be honest, we were so small that we didn't need to. So it's not that was like to anyone's fault. We just didn't know any better or weren't quite there yet.
And coming back to like how I touched on like how growth brings a lot of change, like that was just the first moment that it clicked for me that like we have to have more of a process with when we're buying items and when we're selling items, because month to month you got to think about your cash. And that my husband always said, like, there will be a time when it clicks for you, and it did. Like last fall, it was.
I'm just laughing because I'm like, I can tell you in and out here how we make our cash flow work, and then every time, you know, like I'm sure at your house, you guys have like the budget talk, and Hunter's like, you need to really understand how cash flow works. I'm like, I do. I just like, I do.
Not at home.
Not at home. And we have this constant struggle all the time. This is getting tangent-y, but he'll always say, but the credit card gets the points and stuff. I got to use the credit card. I'm like, but cash flow. Yeah. You know, whatever. It is. I just like to just twist his arm at home. But
so that was like the point in time that we had to like really rethink like how, like what our cadence was of buying and selling. And then at the same time, we also were like taking on these new challenges of like growing our email list and starting to do ads. And like, we were just like,
this was all out of a shed, mind you.
Yes, it was. Or at my
there were
dining room table.
We had just invested in, more shelving for our bins and a whole bin system, because truly before we just had inventory, we'd fold it and put it on the shelf real cute. And so we were on top of each other, to say the least. We shared one table. There were sometimes 3 chairs. One person would be floating around on the floor or middle of the shelves, whatever. But when you think about it, I'm like, we'd made it work. But there was a point where we all looked at each other and said we needed a change. So we moved upstairs to the barn and made that our office. Was real dark, real hot. And our inventory was downstairs. So it just became hard because we were going up, down, up, down, up, down. And it didn't seem efficient. So that was another pivot. Like, what are we going to do space-wise? What are we going to do?
That was another change last fall. We decided to get an office, which, again, that threw a curveball into everything. And I mean, it's been the best decision, like, probably we've ever made in the long run. But
it was a risk.
It was another thing. It was just so much last year. And actually, when we went to Vegas a couple weeks ago, I had this moment where I was like, damn, to think about all the change and how far we've come since Vegas last year, like in 1 year, the amount of pivoting and learning and failures.
It's honestly,
It's like, I mean, that's part of what makes it so rewarding. You know, it's like, wow. And all of these guys have like grown so much, and like, it's just been so awesome. But like, there were several moments last fall where I was like, I mean, I was crumbling sometimes because I was like, oh my God, like, this is so much pressure. I don't know how to navigate this. Like,
and like you said, so much pressure. And I'm sure this was a piece of it, because I also, you know, like in the job I worked before, I didn't have like this, I'm trying to think of the term, not for lack of a better term, like manager-ish, like you have
responsibility,
so it's not just like, oh my God, I'm worrying about this. I'm like, I'm worrying about, because we have people working for us too, that like, I don't ever want to do something that like puts somebody like job at jeopardy or this or that. And like, it's a lot of pressure to think that it's not just like you making decisions for you.
Yes, completely agree.
Just sorry,
I know. Sorry, I think we've got some TikTokers outside of our window. Who is this guy?
I don't know.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think about that with Peter all the time. You know, he at one point had like 300 employees or something. And it's like that puts a whole added layer of pressure. I also look back at, now that I have had this experience, I look back at my old job and I wish that I would have given my like managers a little bit more grace now, knowing how much pressure goes into it and how many bigger decisions are made behind the scenes when you don't know like actually the inner workings of like what they're responsible for. Like I have a whole new appreciation, and I've told Peter this about like when he started Ease 10 years ago. I was really impatient with him in a lot of ways when it came to like working late or, you know, all the things. I just didn't get it. And now that I get it, I'm like, okay, wow. I mean, it is a lot. It's a lot. But the best part about it is, number one, I've grown so much, but also just having such a supportive team has like made it, I never, ever, ever feel alone, even when I make mistakes. And you guys always give me grace, which I appreciate so much. We all do. We all do that for each other.
Yeah, which is, I don't know, the beauty in it, but definitely a lot of change, pivoting, and just accepting that and knowing that like, okay, now that we have this change, like, how am I going to take this change and make
even
it
just last week, like last week was a really, there was one day where we crunched our numbers from last month and we were like, holy shit, we didn't buy enough inventory for this month. And it was like, all right, what are we going to do? Let's freaking pivot and let's figure it out. And it was really overwhelming day, but like we figured it out.
Yeah, like there was just, once again, it feels like all our change always comes at once. Like it was Carmela's first day, our new intern.
Poor Carmela.
It was, we honestly always do our buying in one chunk, and we decided to split it up last month, which was a pivot.
Yep.
It was right after market, so a lot of the vendors were really like
behind.
Backed up. Yeah, thank you. I couldn't think of the word backed up.
It was
so
the beautiful storm because it was like market and then it was a holiday weekend.
Yes,
so
it was a holiday weekend.
Like crazy
and
delays.
There was, and I'm like, we're saying like, oh, yep, we just pivot. But there was that day, last week, that
we
I
all wanted to
cry.
God,
I did. Like on the way home, I'm like, I'm just going to let myself shed a tear and then get over it and be fine because it's going to be fine. But the stress definitely can get, get to you. It doesn't mean it's all like peaches and rainbows, the change. Because I don't want it to sound like we're like, just pivot. Like,
I think
it comes with a lot of, agony and stress. But then we always manage to turn it around and get it figured out.
And I think that's the lesson in all of it. It's like, it's always going to feel really overwhelming, but just being able to acknowledge that like, it's going to result in some sort of really valuable learning that we will apply going forward. You know, like every time we have those moments, we're like, all right, write this down for next year because now we know and now we can plan for it. And that's that's going to happen forever, you know,
which
there's never going to be a point where we're just like, oh yeah, we got it all figured out.
Yeah. And if it did, it's like we'd stop learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we struggle too with like the podcast we were talking about, like what to talk about. And we were like, someone was like business advice, this or that. And we were like, okay, but because we feel like we're ever changing and pivoting and trying something new, we're like, we surely don't ever want to come off as like preachy, like, okay, this is what you do. Because I'm like, we don't know. I mean, we know what we're doing right now and like, sure, that works for us. But like after this next month, then maybe we've changed our entire system.
Completely.
Because
it's likely.
And it's like, we don't know.
Yes. And on that topic, that's a good segue into like some change just from a life standpoint outside of business. I was actually thinking about Sav when we were talking about this topic because I remember, she just graduated and she's recently gone through this transition of like college to real life.
Yeah.
And like, that's a really hard change, especially when I think back, like all of a sudden you're on your own and you don't have this like safety net of still being in school. And then, having kids brings about so much change.
Well, even just like you're out of college, you get hit with like your student loans. You get hit with, you have a job, rent.
Yeah.
Everything now becomes you.
Yeah.
And while it's exciting to like, quote unquote, be out in the real world, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And we have found ourselves lots with Sav being like, okay, we got to put ourselves in that shoe, like her shoes, and saying like, I do remember that. I do remember that feeling of like, and it's, every piece and point of life is a little bit like that.
Or like a career switch or a job switch. Like that always feels really, really scary. And especially once you have a family, like that can feel like such a burden. But I feel
Even the
like trusting your
switch
gut.
from like me working part-time to full-time here and then finding like, you know, I had to find childcare for my kids and whatever, like just that change alone.
Yeah. And the doubt that you feel like,
the
am I
guilt,
doing
the
the
doubt,
right thing?
yeah. Which it always like in the end, you're gonna be fine. Even if like that decision you made wasn't right at first, you're going to change and pivot and whatever, but
you're going to figure
it feels
out why.
So pressed, like heavy at the moment because you're like, am I making the right decision?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But I don't know that there's ever like a crystal ball to be like, this is the right one. This is what you should have picked. This is what you should pick.
I know. And I think that that's the thing. Like the older I get, it's like, I feel like, yeah, you got to just like roll with the punches.
And I'm saying this as I'm a person who has a lot of anxiety and is not good at making a decision. And I question my decisions all the time and overthink my decisions all the time. And I would love to be better about that. But I mean,
I feel like you've come a really long way with that though. Like you've been challenged a lot in it and like you have come a really long way with that.
I
and
have
like trusting your gut.
Learned to be better about it.
Yeah.
Growing in it. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be perfect in that,
but there is a sense of confidence that comes with like that, you know, just like giving yourself the permission to just trust yourself and like drown out whatever is making you question your own, like whatever this decision is that you're making for yourself and your family. Like there's a confidence that comes with that when you're like, everything's great. Like it all turned out great. Or if it didn't turn out great, you learn from it.
That's what I was going to say. I think that's what I have learned is when I make a decision and I'm questioning it, I have to remind myself like, okay, what would be the absolute worst outcome of this?
Right. What's the worst
put my mind
that can
there,
happen?
And then what would I do?
Yeah, you cross that bridge when it comes.
I change this and that. Okay, well, if that's the worst that is going to happen, try it because you likely have better than that worst outcome, you know. But again, easier said than done because my mind always goes to the worst.
Yeah, I know. I always do come back to the quote that like growth comes with discomfort because it's so true. I mean, change is always uncomfortable, but when I think back to like the many changes that I've experienced that were the hardest, it's like I really do feel like all of those experiences were not easy by any means.
No,
but I've grown so much as a person.
Yeah.
And I've applied a lot of those things to like life now. And 10 years from now, I'll laugh at myself saying this because I'm sure it'll be like,
I'll be like,
I knew nothing then.
What did we know? Talking about change. Like, you know, I'm sure we've got a lot of change still coming in our lives, but not to say, I mean, change happens in the workplace, in your life, in all aspects of everything. It comes in mental form, physical form, you know, but not to say change should always be peaches and rainbows and embraced, but trying your best to embrace change because you never know what it's going to bring. And I think that finding a good support system too with a change is important. And a good reminder to everyone to just be supportive of others. Like, you know, sometimes it's like, I want to be quick to be like, okay, you know, but that's, you know, given a little grace.
That's what I was like thinking about, like when I was talking about my old job, like, you know, some change would happen. I'd be like, oh, that's so annoying. Why would they do this? But like now in hindsight, I'm like, well, they probably did that for X, Y, and Z reason to save the company. You know what I mean? Like different things like that. And I also feel like the biggest change in my life that stands out is just the transition from 0 to 1 children. Like having, the worst. Like I mean, people say
kids. Like, a second is going to be bad. I'm like, the worst transition.
Your world
is
turns
0 to 1
upside down.
At least the second you're like, all right, I know I know that this phase will end. I know that this will end. The first one you're like, wait, this entire being depends on me. Like, it's not like a friend where you're like, okay, like if I don't show up to dinner, like it might be like sad, but like we'll get together later. Like this kid every night depends on you to make its bottles. Put it to bed, know what it needs, give it up. Like, it is the weirdest feeling to
talk
feel
about
like,
a lot of change. Like within one day, every aspect of your life changes. Like
I mean, just in a moment, a flash of a moment. You have this baby, they hand it to you, and you're like, whoa, like is this mine? Like I'm just gonna leave with this baby. Like, what do you mean? Give me a whole tutorial? You know, like,
and that feeling is so overwhelming. Like if you are in that situation right now and you're feeling like, oh my God, I so feel for you, but like
Totally.
it will, everything will
figure it out.
The dust will settle and
Yeah.
a new normal comes around, and it's not a bad
does.
new normal. It's just different.
No, there will be a day where you take a deep breath and you're like, okay, we hit our little stride.
Yes.
Did we do that? Yeah, we did that.
Yes. And we've adapted to the change. And yeah, I mean, God, your relationship changes, your day-to-day life changes, your freedoms change, your priorities change, and it's
your
like
hormones change, your hair changes. I mean, truly down to just not even like the dynamic of it, the physical of it, you know. And yeah, that, like we said, that goes with life. And
if you're in that season right now, it'll be okay. I just remember feeling so overwhelmed by that freaking point in life. I also was 23, but
or even like, I wasn't, but like it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
Even, not even if you're not having kids and everything, like even if you're changing where you're living, or you're changing cities, or you're changing jobs, or you're moving from an apartment to a house, you're moving from a house to an apartment, or you're whatever it may be. It's like, it's gonna be hard.
Think about that, like with people who move like far away, like they move out of state or something, whether it be a job or just a decision. I always think like, I think that would be so hard, because I rely so much on my family and friends, and props to anybody who's done that. But I always think like, I don't know. I'm like, how do you make friends and feel like you have a support system when you move? Like, I'm genuinely like,
honestly, I don't know. And this is something that, no, I've lost sleep over. But I have fixated on before.
Lauren never loses sleep in the middle of the night over
never, ever,
a hypothetical situation.
No, but my husband travels for work and is a consultant. And, like, there's always the chance of moving, although... if you ask me, I'm like, there's no chance of moving.
Yeah.
But that's not true. And it eats me alive sometimes, because I'm like, how would I start all over? I mean, I'm not like just this talking about it isn't actually making me want to grow up. But like, it's crazy to think about that people do that. And it's, I mean, like, slow clap for them, because.
Right.
It's amazing.
Another topic, and then we'll wrap this up. But something that I think is so real is marriage changing over time. And like how that can be like really scary and like hard to navigate sometimes, depending on like where you're at with jobs, or where you're at with how old your kids are, or your kids are getting older and they're changing, and there's these new like things you're having to navigate, and life just getting busy. And like, I just think that's a really real thing.
It is. And that just made me think even further back deeper, in the sense of like, you grow up and you live with your family and it's all you've ever known.
Right.
And then you go off and you're on your own for a little bit. And that changes things with the previous, which is like your family. And like everyone's just used to being all together, and then they're not. So finding a way of having to be together. And then if you do get married, you go from like dating and it's all fun and games. And then you move in together and that's fun. And then you want to have a baby, and then it's a change again. And then, it's just like, a friend and I were saying this, like, it's kind of wild. You get married and you're like, wait, so for like the rest of my life, I'm sleeping in the same bed as this person.
Right.
I never, ever like have, this house is never just like mine.
Yeah.
Like, obviously I love sharing everything, but it's like, you have this realization that like, that's a big like thing to adapt to. And because everything's changing, you have to just read up.
Totally. I try to look at, I feel like all things like change. I just try to really look at it as like, it's a season.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whether it be like work,
okay.
kids, like temper tantrums, a rough patch in marriage, a rough patch with family or friends. I'm like, okay, it's a season. And like, there are so many things going on, and trying not to let myself get paralyzed or make any like, crazy decisions. Yeah.
If you ever see me cut my hair short again, just know that I'm not well. I feel like I used to cut my hair when I had a big change, and now I've learned, like, don't do that.
It sounds kind of fun, though.
Don't do that. I don't look cute with short
Sleep
hair.
on it.
Right, but I would make an appointment, like, at Aveda that day when I was in college. I'd be like, that's it. I'm going to cut my hair off.
Oh, that's so funny to think about. Like, when someone gets a big haircut, it's like, well, what's she going through?
Or they change the color of your hair. Like, which, I guess, that's not always the case. But for me, like, I know that I used to, like, make a rash decision. And it's like, pump the brakes.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyways,
all that to say, change is a real thing and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we face it all the time. And I'm sure you guys do too. And if you're in a hard, a hard phase in any aspect, whether it be career or family or marriage or life in general, you're not alone.
Nope.
And you will get through it. Put one foot in front of the other. That's what we're doing over here.
And it doesn't even have to be a big change. I'm thinking like this is this week's podcast. By next week, hopefully it could change.
Yeah.
We could have 2 cameras like we want. Change is change. And you got to just sometimes ride the wave.
Yeah. And also ask for help if you need it. If you need to just have a silent, 10 minutes to sit in the closet and scroll your phone or drink a glass of wine, no shame in that game.
Really?
None.
You want to say that for people in the back? When you literally annihilated me on last week's podcast because I said, can we have some scroll time? Can everyone be quiet?
Go in the closet.
I'm like, we were at a hotel with 4 of us in the room. I'm like, where am I going to go to scroll my phone? I was like, can we all just have a minute and scroll our phone?
Go in the lobby.
Yeah, it's louder than I'll get out in that Vegas lobby. I just needed a minute.
But truly, take a second for yourself if you need it. And don't feel bad about asking for help if you need it.
Right.
And if you guys want to chit chat with us about it, as always, send us a DM or an email. And if you are in a hard situation, we would love to hear about it because I'm sure we've been there. And maybe we can share some of those on our stories so that, people
anonymously, obviously.
Anonymously.
Where if somebody else has been through that, they could,
I always find that comforting. Even if it's just a stranger, just to hear oh, you're in a rough patch in your marriage. Okay, well, that's relatable. I've been there.
Or
it
makes you hate what you're doing.
You hate what you're doing. You're not happy at your job.
You're not alone.
Your kids are driving you fucking crazy.
Right. Or on the flip side, in a positive way, a change, I have done this before, and we've talked about this, where I'll be like, oh my God, it just hit me. My kids are getting so old. I want to be there. Change in that way. It doesn't have to be a driving nuts, but there are change where I've learned my limit to say nope, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I need
to be at home.
Yeah.
I need to do this.
Yeah. Protecting those boundaries.
Yeah, which is hard at first because you need to throw a lot of time at a new business, but you start to learn this is not going to be good for me in the long run.
Yeah, because burnout is the worst thing that can happen. Yeah. Nobody wants that to happen, and it's definitely not productive when you push yourself to that point where you're feeling like you're giving 100 to this job, but you're missing your kids. That's not what life is about.
And the good thing is we are all women that work here, and
we're all
nobody wants anyone else to miss something. If somebody says oh, but so-and-so has this that day, we're that's where you should be.
Yeah. If somebody needs a break, you get the break. You take the break and you don't feel guilty about it.
And we were Savannah and I were just talking about this last night after a pop-up. We were talking about how she really enjoys working the races.
Yeah.
And she was kind of asking, she was like, I feel like I should do it next year. And I was like, well, I think that you should, because here's the thing. I don't mind working the pop-ups in the summer, but where I get really, I'm going to shut it off and not do it. I'm like, if my kids have a sporting event, I also always told myself I'm not missing those things.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, great.
Or around the holidays.
Yeah, I'm like, great.
Life
she wants
so
to do
crazy.
Saturdays.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I want to be here and I need to hold my ground. And we really have gotten to a good spot of saying you do that,
and feel
I'll
empowered to do that at your job. If you're valued, you should 100% be able to put your foot down and protect those boundaries. 100%. Never
and
be
allowing
afraid
yourself to
not feel guilty about it.
And do it and not feel like, oh my God, I'm letting everyone down by doing this.
Never.
It's you're not, well,
unless you're sucking.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I do feel like
everyone here busts their asses. And when they need a break,
makes a difference.
They deserve a break. Yeah.
So I think that just comes back to who you work with, because it's we all acknowledge everyone's busting butt here. And if they want a break, they're going to take it and we're all going to support it. But I do agree that would get under my skin if it was somebody who wasn't pulling their weight. And it's what do you mean? The rest of us are doing X, Y, and Z, So anyways, okay. I feel like that was a long podcast on change. Feel free to always comment, send in a DM, and subscribe. That'll tell you when a new episode comes out. It doesn't mean you're some weird groupie.
Yep. And if you haven't used Unbutton 10 yet, it gets you 10% off of your purchase. And our new arrivals going live tomorrow night are real good.
Yeah, they are.
They're awesome. All right. Talk to you guys next week.